The Las Vegas Raiders had practice earlier today, and quarterback Aidan McConnell was not at practice for the Raiders, and he left a lot of people kind of confused as to what is happening with ALC. And the injury report actually has officially come out now, and we know exactly what happened with D Nano. Aidan McConnell was not at the Raiders practice because he has some sort of illness, and he did not participate for the Las Vegas Raiders, which ultimately opened the door for Desmond Ridder. And I want to talk about Aidan McConnell in this video because Aidan McConnell really good for the Raiders against the Chiefs. And I think as we kind of go forward, we're going to find out a lot about Aidan McConnell in these final 5 games. And more than that, we're going to find out a lot about this team now. Before we go forward, I wanted to share with you guys my picks for Underdog Fantasy. We're going to do picks for the Thursday night football game, make it a little bit more interesting coming up here in a couple of hours. It's a $5 entry for $200. That's the payout. We're going to take the high on Jordan Love because I think the Green Bay Packers are going to have to throw the ball a lot. I think there's a chance the Detroit L are going to get up early in this game, and I think the Packers are going to kind of play catch up. And some of these picks kind of follow that same trend, right? I think that's ultimately what's going to end up happening. So I think Jordan Love's going to throw the ball a little bit more. So I'm going to take the higher that he'll have at least 253 passing yards. I think as soon as the Lions get up, Jamari Gibbs is going to end up being able to run the ball as well because the Lions are going to want to kind of waste that clock out a little bit. So I'm going to take the higher on Jamari Gibbs. I think he's one of the most talented running backs in the NFL as the lines get up. I think Josh Jacobs is not going to get the amount of carries he's gotten over the past couple of weeks. I think against the Dolphins this past week, he had like 20 carries for like 50 yards. So I'm going to take the lower on Josh Jacobs. I think he might have not as many carries this game, especially since I think the Lions will end up putting up a lot of points. And then with that, with the Packers throwing the ball, I think Jayden Reed will also end up getting the touchdown. Jayden Reed is the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL, in my personal opinion. And then I also think Rashan Gary will get at least 1 sack. Gary has not had a great season this season. The Detroit Lions are dealing with a few key offensive linemen missing, which could have a big impact on the game. One thing to consider is how this might affect the multiplier in Underdog Fantasy picks. The odds on Rashan Gary getting a sack might seem lower because the Lions have one of the top tackles in the league, Penei Sewell. However, Gary has been moving around a lot more on the defensive line recently, which could give him a chance to get to the quarterback. If Gary ends up lined up against the Lions left tackle, who's currently out, he could definitely get a sack. Even if he doesn't, the Packers often bring 5 guys on defense, which could open up a one-on-one matchup for Gary against the right guard. That's the kind of opportunity that could lead to a sack, especially in a primetime game on national TV. Let me know what you think about that prediction. If you've never used Underdog Fantasy before, there's a link in the comments where you can sign up and join the fun. I'd love to hear your picks and the thought process behind them. As for me, I'm betting on the Lions scoring plenty of points and the Packers playing catch up to keep up with that. We'll see if that's how it plays out. Now let's get back to the Raiders situation. It makes sense that Aidan McConnell is out due to an illness, and it's likely he'll be back for Sunday's game. I'd honestly be surprised if McConnell doesn't play, but in case he doesn't, Desmond Ridder took the first team reps today. If McConnell can't go, Ridder would start, and Carter Bradley would probably be the backup quarterback. But let's talk about McConnell for a second. What if he does miss the game? Is there even a point in playing him the rest of the season? The Raiders have a few winnable games ahead. They'll face the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are without their starting quarterback, and the New Orleans Saints, who have struggled this season. So there are two games that seem like good opportunities to win. Plus, the Raiders still play the Chargers, which could also be winnable. It's clear that having McConnell on the field makes a big difference. The offense looked much better against the Kansas City Chiefs when he played. Some people might argue it was because of offensive coordinator Scott Turner's play calling, but McConnell's performance stood out. His ability to lead the offense could be crucial as the season continues. The Raiders' offense has clearly improved over the past few weeks, and a lot of that can be credited to Scott Turner taking over as offensive coordinator. When you look at the stats, the difference is obvious. In just the past 3 weeks, the Raiders have had more 300-yard games than they did in the first 9 weeks of the season. They've hit that 300-yard mark 3 times in the last 3 games, while they only managed it 3 times in the first 9 games. It's not just about the total yardage either. If you look at the Raiders' yards per play, the change is night and day. Under Scott Turner, the team has averaged 5.3 yards per play against the Dolphins, 5 yards against the Broncos, and 6.9 yards against the Chiefs. Before Turner's arrival, the numbers were much lower. Only 3.7 yards per play against the Bengals and around 4 yards per play in the other games. That's a huge improvement. Even the run game has started to click over the past 2 weeks. With averages of 4.3 and 4.6 yards per carry, the Raiders are getting some of their best rushing stats of the season. The offensive line is coming together, the play calling is more effective, and the quarterback play has been solid. Aidan McConnell in particular ran the offense really well this past week. Looking ahead, the Raiders need to figure out whether Aidan McConnell is their quarterback of the future. I know some fans may be skeptical about that, but I would argue that if McConnell can prove himself, the Raiders could be in a better position. Having a quarterback who could be the future of the franchise would allow the team to use their draft picks on other key positions, strengthening the team overall. Of course, McConnell still has a lot to prove, and it's possible the Raiders may choose to draft a quarterback anyway. But for now, McConnell's development will be crucial as the season moves forward. Even though he didn't practice today, he should be ready to go for Sunday's game. Hopefully, he can continue the strong play we've seen from the offense recently. It's clear that the Raiders' offense has improved, and while Scott Turner deserves credit for that, McConnell's performance is a big part of the equation too. Let's talk about Sincere McCormick and the big impact he's making for the Raiders. Over the last 2 weeks, McCormick has gone from being on the practice squad to officially joining the active roster. This is a huge deal for both him and the team. It all started when Alexander Mattison got injured during the Dolphins game. McCormick was called up from the practice squad, and since then, he's been shining. After 2 impressive performances against the Broncos and the Chiefs, the Raiders decided to sign him to the active roster permanently. This move isn't just great for McCormick's career, but also for his paycheck. The salary jump from the practice squad to the active roster is massive, so congratulations to him. Here's why this signing was so important. While McCormick was still on the practice squad, any team could have signed him away. His strong performances against the Broncos and Chiefs made him a target for other teams in need of a running back. The Raiders recognized this and acted fast to lock him in. Raiders coach Antonio Pierce confirmed that McCormick will now play a bigger role. He'll be getting more carries moving forward, which makes sense given how well he's been performing. Pierce also mentioned that McCormick has looked good since training camp and preseason. But here's the real question. If McCormick has been performing so well, why wasn't he playing more earlier? The Raiders' running back room has struggled this season. Zamir White hasn't been great. Alexander Mattison helped a bit before his injury, and Dylan L. hasn't shown much. Yet McCormick wasn't used as much until now. It makes you wonder what the team was waiting for. You have to wonder, if Sincere McCormick was showing so much potential, why didn't the Raiders give him more opportunities earlier? It seems like it took injuries to the players ahead of him, like Alexander Madison and even Amir Abdullah, who's mostly a third down option, for McCormick to finally get his chance. Now let's talk about running styles. There's a big difference between being a zone running back and a power running back. In a power scheme, things can be a bit easier, especially if your offensive line is stronger than the defensive players in front of them. McCormick has benefited from the Raiders' improved offensive line, which is performing much better now than it was 8 weeks ago. The Raiders have leaned more on power running lately, but they're not running a lot of zone plays anymore. It makes me curious. How would McCormick perform in a zone scheme? Zone running is great for creating big, explosive plays, and I think we need to see what McCormick can do in that setup before calling him the future of the Raiders' backfield. Let's see how he performs for the rest of the season. Now on to some other exciting news. The Raiders just signed a new wide receiver, and he's fast. Like really fast. This player ran a blazing 4.31 seconds in the 40-yard dash. With DJ Turner injured, the Raiders needed a new receiver, so they brought in Shedrick Jackson. If the name sounds familiar, it's because he's the nephew of the legendary Bo Jackson. Jackson has some NFL experience and has shown flashes of talent, but we'll see how much he actually gets to play. It's an intriguing pickup though, and it'll be interesting to watch how the Raiders use him moving forward. DJ Turner played an important role for the Raiders, especially with his motion plays and deep routes. Now that he's injured, the team needs someone to fill that role. Shedrick Jackson might be the guy to do it. With his incredible 4.31 speed, he has the traits to replace Turner's style of play. Speed like that can't be coached. Jackson could end up seeing more action than some of the other wide receivers, like Tree Tucker, who hasn't been used in that motion role recently. Moving forward, the Raiders need someone who can execute those deep route concepts, and Jackson seems like a good fit. Of course, we don't want to overhype him. He's still new to the system, and learning the plays will take time. But I like the Raiders' approach here. They're bringing in players with standout traits and seeing if they can make it work. We've seen this strategy before with guys like Kalavon Chasson, who had raw talent and upside when he joined. Under a good coaching staff like Patrick Graham on defense, Rob Leonard as a position coach, and Antonio Pierce as head coach, the team has done a great job of maximizing players' potential. That said, being a wide receiver is different. It's not just about raw talent. You have to run precise routes, understand the scheme, and consistently get open. For Jackson, it's still early days, but his speed alone opens up interesting possibilities. We saw quarterback Aidan O'Connell connect on some deep throws recently, so maybe Jackson can be the next big playmaker. Now I want to hear from you. What are your expectations for Aidan O'Connell in the coming games? How do you think Sincere McCormick will perform with more opportunities? And do you believe Shedrick Jackson can add value to the Raiders? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video.